What happened inside room 213? True crime documentary. The Jeffrey Dahmer Hotel Incident, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 1991. The door to room 213 clicked shut behind the young man, and everything suddenly felt wrong. The room smelled strange, like chemicals mixed with something sour. Jeffrey Dahmer stood in the doorway, blocking the exit, his eyes cold and fixed on him. The young man's heart pounded as he realized he was trapped. There was no noise from the hallway, no footsteps, nothing. Just the quiet hum of the air conditioner and Dahmer's slow breathing. This was the moment everything changed. This was the moment the truth about what happened inside room 213 began to unfold. Just minutes earlier, the young man had been sitting on the bed while Dahmer said he wanted to take pictures. At first, it seemed harmless. Dahmer didn't look dangerous. He didn't talk loudly or act wild. He seemed slow, nervous, almost shy. But now his voice had changed. His hands were shaking, and in one of those hands, he held something metallic that glinted under the dim yellow light. "Just relax," Dahmer whispered, but the young man could tell there was nothing safe about this room. His eyes darted around. The carpet was stained, the air felt heavy, and then he saw it, a blue plastic container shoved partly under the bed. Something about it terrified him, though he didn't know why yet. He looked back at Dahmer, trying to stay calm, trying to think, but Dahmer took a step forward. That was when the young man realized he had only one chance to survive. He had to escape before Dahmer got too close. But before you understand how that terrifying moment happened, you need to know how everything started. Because what took place inside room 213 wasn't sudden. It didn't appear out of nowhere. It grew slowly, piece by piece, long before the night of the incident. Jeffrey Dahmer had been living in Milwaukee for years, and by 1991, he had developed a dangerous pattern that almost no one noticed. People in the city knew him as a quiet man. He wasn't loud, he didn't cause trouble, he bought his groceries, paid his rent, and lived alone. That was it. Nothing about him made most people think he was dangerous. He kept to himself inside the Oxford Apartments, a building where many people came and went. Most neighbors were used to strange noises or odd smells because the building wasn't well taken care of. So when Dahmer's apartment began giving off horrible odors, most people assumed it was spoiled food or the pipes acting up again. Some complained, but the problems were ignored or brushed aside. Nobody knew what was really happening behind his closed door. Dahmer himself seemed like a ghost in the building, quiet, shy, often seen carrying bags, sometimes coming home late at night, but nothing about him seemed violent. However, deep inside Dahmer, something dark was growing. He felt lonely, disconnected, and desperate for control. He didn't want people to leave him, so he started finding ways to make sure they couldn't. That thinking led him to the bars and clubs around Milwaukee, where he watched people closely. He didn't pick loud people. He didn't choose anyone who traveled with friends. He watched the ones who looked alone, or tired, or trusting. Those were the ones he invited back. And almost every time, people believed him. He didn't look like a monster. He didn't act like someone who had a plan. He looked ordinary. That was the danger. On the night leading to room 213, Dahmer had been walking through the city again, watching, waiting, and looking for someone who would trust him long enough to follow him back. The young man he met didn't know Dahmer's history. He didn't know about the missing people. He didn't know about the terrible things that had already happened inside Dahmer's apartment in the Oxford building. He only heard Dahmer's calm voice and saw a man who seemed lonely and harmless. They reached the room. The young man stepped inside. He looked around. The curtains were closed. The air didn't smell right, and the bed looked strangely messy. But he told himself not to worry. Everything changed when Dahmer quietly locked the door. That small click, barely louder than a whisper, was the moment the danger became real. Now, trapped inside room 213,
The young man tried to stay calm as Dahmer moved closer. His mind raced. He couldn't show fear. He needed Dahmer to think he was relaxed. Maybe if he stayed calm, he could find a way out. Maybe Dahmer would put the object down. Maybe he could run for the door. But Dahmer's expression didn't change. He lifted the metallic object slightly. His voice dropped. "You're not going anywhere." The young man took a slow breath, pretending to follow Dahmer's command. But at the same time, he made a decision. He was going to fight. He was going to run. He was going to survive. He waited for the right second, one chance, one moment to break free. And then, Dahmer lunged. Dahmer lunged so fast that the young man barely had time to react. Instinct took over. He grabbed Dahmer's wrist, the one holding the metal object, and pushed it away from his face. The force sent both of them stumbling sideways, crashing into the edge of the bed. For a second, the room exploded into chaos. Sheets flew, the lamp shook, and Dahmer's breath hitched in anger. But the young man didn't let go. He knew this was his only chance. Dahmer tried to twist free, but the young man pushed back even harder. He felt a wave of fear rush through him, mixed with adrenaline. He had never fought for his life before, never thought he would have to. But right now, everything depended on him not giving up. For a small moment, he overpowered Dahmer, and that moment saved him. He shoved Dahmer backward, making enough space to run. The young man sprinted toward the door of room 213, heart pounding so loud he could hear nothing else. He grabbed the doorknob with shaking hands, twisting and pulling, begging it to open. But it didn't. Dahmer had locked it with a chain. Before he could undo it, Dahmer grabbed him from behind. The young man felt Dahmer's arm wrap around his neck, pulling tight. He gasped, fighting for air, clawing at Dahmer's forearm. The metal object clattered to the floor, but Dahmer didn't need it to keep control. His strength was shocking, stronger than the young man expected from someone who looked quiet and thin. "Just stop," Dahmer hissed. "Stop fighting." But the young man couldn't. He wouldn't. He elbowed Dahmer's stomach, twisting his body. Dahmer staggered half a step. That tiny shift loosened the grip just enough for the young man to suck in one lungful of air. He elbowed Dahmer again, harder this time. Dahmer groaned and lost his balance. The young man broke free.
He didn't think. He didn't look back. He rushed toward the window. People always imagine dramatic escapes in movies, glass shattering, heroic jumps, fast music. But real life is messier, scarier. The window didn't open easily. It was old, stuck, swollen from years of humidity. He slammed his palms against it, lifting with all the strength he had. Nothing. Behind him, Dahmer was getting up. His footsteps were slow but heavy. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't yelling. He was too calm, too controlled, and that scared the young man more than the attack itself. He kept lifting the window, shaking, sweating, begging it to move. Finally, it slid up an inch. Then another. Then enough for him to squeeze his fingers under it. But Dahmer grabbed his shoulders. The young man screamed and kicked backward. The window slid down again, smashing his fingers. Pain shot through his hand, but he didn't stop fighting. He twisted around, pushing Dahmer away. They struggled again, hands sliding across the window frame, each trying to overpower the other. For a moment, the young man thought he couldn't do it, that this room might truly become his last memory. But then somehow, he slipped out of Dahmer's grip again and ran toward the door. This time, he didn't waste a second. His fingers flew to the chain lock, yanking it, sliding it, doing everything he could. He felt the chain finally come loose. Behind him, Dahmer whispered in a low voice, "You're making this harder than it has to be." The young man didn't wait to hear the rest. He flung the door open and sprinted down the hallway, barefoot, terrified, and shaking. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had to get away from room 213. He ran down one flight of stairs, then another. His breath was ragged. His heartbeat felt like it would burst through his chest.
He made it to the lobby and ran toward a group of people standing near the entrance. "Help me!" he shouted. "Please, help me!" Everyone turned. People stared at his injuries, his shaking hands, the fear in his eyes. The hotel staff froze for a split second, confused, but then someone ran to him. Another person called the police. A crowd formed as the young man pointed upstairs, his voice trembling. "He tried to kill me. He tried, but he couldn't finish the sentence. The police arrived within minutes. Officers rushed upstairs to room 213, while others stayed with the young man, trying to calm him. He was shaking so much his teeth chattered. He kept looking toward the stairwell, terrified that Dahmer would suddenly appear. Upstairs, the officers walked silently down the hallway. When they reached the door, they paused. No sound came from inside. No movement, no breathing. One of the officers knocked. "Milwaukee Police Department, open the door!" Silence. They knocked again, harder. Still nothing. Finally, they used a key from the hotel staff to unlock the door. They stepped inside cautiously, hands on their weapons. The room was quiet. Too quiet. The lamp was knocked over. The sheets were twisted on the bed. The window was slightly open. But Jeffrey Dahmer was gone.
The officers searched the bathroom, the closet, behind the curtains, everywhere. Nothing. It was as if he had vanished in minutes. Downstairs, when the officers returned, one of them leaned close to the young man and said quietly, "He's not in the room." The young man felt the world tilt again. Dahmer wasn't caught. He wasn't in handcuffs. He wasn't stopped. He was still out there, free, and the police had no idea where he went next. Dahmer was gone, and the police knew they had no time to waste. The young man's escape from room 213 wasn't just a lucky break. It was the moment that cracked open the secret life Jeffrey Dahmer had been hiding for years. Officers rushed out of the hotel, searching nearby streets, alleys, and parking lots. But Dahmer had disappeared into the city like a shadow. Inside the station, detectives questioned the young man carefully. He explained everything: the strange smell, the pictures Dahmer wanted to take, the metal object, the fight, the escape. Every detail matched what officers already suspected. Jeffrey Dahmer was far more dangerous than anyone realized. Police knew they needed to go to Dahmer's real home, the place he lived almost every day, the Oxford Apartments, apartment 213, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. If what the young man said was true, then room 213 was nothing compared to what might be inside Dahmer's actual apartment. The decision was made. It was time to go inside. The Oxford Apartments were quiet when the officers arrived. The hallway smelled strange, and some neighbors peeked through their doors, curious about the sudden police presence. One officer knocked on Dahmer's door. "Milwaukee Police Department, we need to speak with you." No answer. They knocked again. Still nothing. Finally, they used a master key from the property manager to open the door. When the lock clicked, a cold wave of dread passed over everyone. They stepped in carefully, flashlights moving across the dim room, and immediately the smell hit them. It wasn't normal. It wasn't food. It wasn't trash. It was something far worse, something that stayed in their clothes, their skin, and their minds for years. They aimed their flashlights across the living room. At first glance, it looked normal. A couch, a fish tank, a small table, nothing strange. But then one of the officers opened the refrigerator. What he saw made him stumble backward. Inside the fridge was a human head. Not a picture, not an illusion, a real preserved human head wrapped carefully in plastic. Another officer opened a drawer in the freezer. More remains, carefully stored, organized, as if Dahmer had been saving them. And that wasn't all. The officers opened a large blue drum in the corner of the room. Inside the drum was a chemical mixture, acid, and floating inside it were human parts that had been dissolving. Another officer opened the cabinets. Inside were skulls, bones, and photos, dozens of photos showing Dahmer's victims before and after death.
The pictures were so disturbing that some officers had to leave the room to breathe. This was not just a crime scene. This was a nightmare, a horror beyond anything Milwaukee had imagined. At the station, while officers raided the apartment, Dahmer walked back toward his building, calm, quiet, and unaware of what waited for him. He didn't run, he didn't hide, he simply returned home like it was any normal night. But as soon as he reached the front of the Oxford Apartments, he saw the police lights. He saw officers standing outside. And in that moment, he knew his secret world was over. Before Dahmer could turn around or escape, police surrounded him. He didn't fight, he didn't speak, he didn't even look surprised. He let them place handcuffs on him without a single word. When officers brought him inside for questioning, Dahmer confessed almost everything. He talked about the victims, he talked about the photographs, he talked about the things he had been hiding in the apartment. His voice was flat, calm, as if he had been waiting for this moment. He described the terrible acts that had gone on for years, stuff no person should ever hear, things the officers would never forget. Milwaukee had never seen anything like it before. The young man who escaped from room 213 would later learn he had survived something almost no one else had. His bravery, his instinct to fight, and the small moments of luck all came together to stop one of the most dangerous serial killers in American history. News spread across the United States within hours. Every channel reported the shocking discovery inside apartment 213. Reporters flooded Milwaukee. Families of missing people contacted the police in panic and hope. People couldn't believe someone like Dahmer could hide in plain sight for so long. Room 213, the place where the young man escaped, became a symbol of the moment Dahmer's secret life finally collapsed. If the young man hadn't fought back, if he hadn't escaped, if he hadn't told the police, Dahmer might have continued for months, maybe years. But the truth finally came out. Dahmer was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. In 1994, another inmate took his life inside the prison walls. His crimes remain some of the darkest in U.S. history. His apartment was torn down, the building no longer exists. But the story still haunts America. And it all began with one young man who refused to give up in room 213.